Hey, gang, welcome back. Let me ask you a question. You're watching this podcast, you're listening to this podcast. Have you ever been a guest on a podcast before? Chances are you have. It's quite a popular platform to get on these days. There are lots of them out there. But let me ask you another question. If you've been a guest on one or more podcasts, has that directly turned into business for you? And chances are the answer is I don't know, or maybe, or no. It's a big challenge for a lot of us. I know I've been interviewed on over 150 podcasts in the past, and my results of being interviewed have been kind of hit and miss. And we're going to solve that today because Lindsay Phillips is an expert on that. She's an expert on helping us to really leverage our guesting appearances on other people's podcasts. She's been doing this for years. She's been working with lots and lots of coaches and consultants and advisors, helping them to get much, much better at this. And I can vouch for it. I've been following Lindsay. I've been looking at her stuff. I've been studying her materials. Very, very good. I've made some major tweaks on how I do this, and it's made a big difference. So, Lindsay, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me and another Canadian. Yeah, I just love what you're doing.
Yeah, well, don't hold that against us. We'll be nice, right?
Canadians are always nice.
Well, that's what they say, but yeah, for sure. Um, so Lindsay, I kind of touched on this, but you've been in the trenches with this for a long time. So why is it that so many people struggle with getting results from being a guest on podcasts?
Yeah, and there's a few reasons. Part of it is industry based. I mean, if you think about it, all the coaches, companies, information out there is super focused on hosts, how to grow their show, how to launch, how to produce, how to get more downloads and what have you. And with guests, weirdly enough, it's all about pitching, what shows to get on shows. And then
One pagers, one sheets,
yeah,
what kind of
and
picture to
that's
have.
it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so no one talks about, okay, what do you do afterwards? And no one really talks about how to craft that conversation. And it's tough, right? Like as a guest, and I hear this all the time where people are like, oh, I'm guesting on shows. And I'm like, oh, what is your strategy? What is the asking them questions? And they're, oh, I just want to hop on, get exposure, tap into their audience, answer questions, and give value. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
But you can do that, but you also have to have strategy, just like as if you're a podcast host. But they just don't necessarily realize kind of like what they're saying and how they're saying it and how it impacts the listener and their experience, and are they compelled to take action and take the next step?
Well, not only that, Lindsay, but there are a lot of companies out there that offer services for getting you booked on podcasts, and they'll help you with your one pager, and they'll supposedly help you figure out what kind of shows you want to be on. I know this because I get pitched by these guys nonstop with their
Yes.
guests. However, you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars. In fact, one company I know of, it's like $7,000 or $8,000 to get booked on
Hmm.
30 shows or something like that. And that's quite common. But if you don't have that strategy for converting those appearances into business, it's a waste of money.
It totally is. You're throwing spaghetti against a wall and hoping that it sticks. And I've been there. I've paid to have a podcast, booking agency. And I remember I was like so excited. I'm going to get more exposure, like, all the things. And then it was like a week went by, 10 days went by. And I'm like, where's my booking? Like, when am I going to get on a show?
Yeah.
And one of the problems is the topic. And so my topic was like, I don't even remember anymore, but it's like something to do with content marketing,
Pretty
like the
plain vanilla
411
type.
of content marketing or something. It was like
Yeah.
so vague, so general, so boring. So yes, I have made those huge mistakes.
Yeah.
And when you
What are
stop
some
and
of the
think
other
about
big
it,
mistakes that you see all the time, Lindsay? Like,
yes, I will get to those, but I don't want to leave these people hanging on like what I
yeah.
did with the podcast topics. Um But the topic was, again, super boring, so I wasn't getting booked. It wasn't until I really made it very specific. So it was like the 3 ways to use social media marketing to get more leads and clients, as an example.
Mhm.
So the podcast topic actually does a few things. One, it positions you as an expert because even if you look at that title, you're like, oh, I know what they're an expert at. The second is, of course, it hooks the podcast host, right? They'll decide of whether that's an exciting show for their audience, whether it's a hot topic, and it also tells them whether the guest is going to give a ton of value. If someone says, "Oh, the 401 of content marketing," they're like, it could go anywhere. But if it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, 3 ways to increase your whatever ROI by X percent," there's going to be a ton of good nuggets for your audience. And
This is
thirdly,
how clueless I am, Lizzie. I don't even know what the 401 represents. What does
oh,
that even mean?
411. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
411. There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
did I say 401? You know what, if I did say 401, it's because of our 401 highway, which is huge.
That's what I was thinking. But we're not in Toronto. Okay. But even 411 these
411.
days, what does that mean? Like, do
Yeah,
people even know what that means?
I know. Maybe I'm aging myself here, Dave. Oh no.
That used to be like the number we dial for information, right?
Yes,
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. But I go, when was the last time? It's
I
been
know.
30
I'm
years since
sorry.
I've dialed for one, but I get what you mean. So, but
Yeah,
that just illustrates like if you got like
right.
something like that,
Confusing.
who the heck's going to know what that's all
I
about?
know. I know.
Yeah.
So I was totally shooting myself in the foot. So when you have like a good topic, also the host typically uses that topic for the title of the show. So
Mhm.
then if that topic is being used for the title, the listeners aren't going to know what the heck the show's about and if it's going to be relevant or have value for them. And
Right.
so I call these like billboard ready topics because the topic is your billboard, like for the listener, for the host. And so you really want to make sure that that topic is relevant to the audience, but then it also showcases your expertise and it also shows what the person's going to gain from listening to that episode.
Yeah.
So
There's
that was just one
a
lesson I had to learn the hard way.
super important. Yeah, I never thought that much about topics, but it makes total sense, right? And you're right. Most podcasters, myself included, we're kind of lazy, so we're going to grab that topic, probably use that or some slight variation for the episode title as well. So if it doesn't telegraph, you're going to get, first of all, you're not going to be that appealing to be interviewed in the first place, and if you
Mhm.
do get interviewed, it's not going to get that many downloads.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
100%.
So you clued into that topic is super important. Come up with a sexy topic that
Mhm.
connects with your expertise, is enticing for the listener and the podcaster, and kind of gives the gist of what you're doing. So let's say we come up with that. What are some of the other ways that we as
Yeah.
podcast guests can screw it up?
For sure. I know. The biggest is your mindset too. It's
Mm,
like you have to think about your podcast topic or the conversation as the bridge between the audience's pain and what they're struggling with and your offers. And I never had that thought process when I started out either. I was like, oh, I can talk about email marketing. Like, I know enough about that. I can talk about how to be productive in your business or how to run a VA agency.
mhm.
And the reason why my interviews weren't working is because at the end, I had like a resource that was like a social media roadmap or something. And so there was a huge disconnect between what I was talking about in the interview and the resource that I was giving. Or I would actually get people getting on my calendar, but then they wanted like email marketing services. And I was like,
Right.
oh, I actually kind of don't have any packages for that.
Or they
I
wanted
do
help with
this.
VAs, or they wanted, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever you're not doing. Yeah.
So it wasn't directly correlating with what my offers were. I was like, "Oh, I just want to sound like an expert. I want to, serve the audience and give them
I want to get
tips."
exposure. I want to get the
Yeah,
word out, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I know.
Hmm.
So yeah, so really thinking about the conversation in a different way. I call it the bridge to profits. So again, you're connecting the audience. What pain are they experiencing in their voice? Like what thoughts are going through their head? And then how can you kind of create that little journey for the listener so that it leads them to your offers? And
So what
obvious
does that maybe kind of look like or sound like in practice, Lindsay?
Yeah. So I'll give myself as an example.
Perfect. Yeah.
So if I'm on a show talking about how to create strategic conversations for podcast guests so they can get more ROI, I do have a lead magnet, which I'm happy to share later on, that covers those things, those shifts to create those conversations that convert. And then, of course, I have a bigger program where I work one on one on people to help make that happen. So there's a direct line between, oh my God, my podcasts aren't giving me ROI, conversations are all over the map, it doesn't position me as an expert,
So that's the
to,
pain. Yeah. That's
yep,
the painful side. Okay. And
and
then
then
the
our
bridge.
conversation and the
Hmm.
tips that we're sharing or I'm sharing, and then a lead magnet, and then of course my offer. So there's like a direct thread. So the listeners are brought along to really dig into the pain, see what's going wrong, share a couple of tips, and know what the solution is. I mean,
Hmm.
there's obviously other things that I can unpack from it. But it's just really thinking about it from start to finish and what your end goal is. I mean, we
So
do
one,
that with all other marketing, but for some
yeah.
strange reason, we don't think of it when we're guesting on podcasts.
Well, I know one of the challenges I have, Lindsay, when I'm a guest on somebody's podcast is I tend to kind of, I think, teach too much. I think I try to give all the value that I can
Been
in
there.
the interview and hope that that's going to, create reciprocity and goodwill, and somehow that'll convert into clients. What do you suggest we do instead of that?
That is a great question. So when I work with a client, obviously we go over the topic, making sure that it's aligned with your offers. We talk about the interview questions that you want the host to ask, and we can kind of dive into that after if we have time. But
Mhm.
then thinking about your talking points. And so you don't want to fire hose the audience. You want to be very specific to what the problem is. But you also want to explain it in an overarching way. Um, so let me use an example to better illustrate this.
Sure.
So I was working with a client and her conversation was about like recharging your inner battery and all about like um how energy is really important and how you focus your energy to get better results. But the whole conversation was about the inner battery and then she gave this inner battery thing away. But no one understood her overarching framework and how she worked with people. So you are on the right track in that you want to give a ton of value, but you also need to let the audience understand from a sky high view of like, oh, I have this framework of how you can focus your energy. And when I work with my clients in this program, we look at 12 pillars. Today I'm going to share one, and then you focus on that one. So
Got it.
they know it's a piece of the bigger puzzle, kind of have an understanding of maybe how you work with people. So that way you're not feeling like you have to give everything. So
Got it.
you're
Uh,
positioning the tips that you're sharing as a piece of the bigger puzzle and your bigger strategy, your framework, your process, your method, whatever that is, so that they can kind of picture it in their mind, but know that there's more. Does that
so
make
it really,
sense?
yeah. So it really is about giving them a taste of it, kind of going in deep on one part of your whole thing, but also giving them like the big picture overview so they can kind of connect the dots, but they don't
Yeah,
necessarily have the full picture, which they never are going to get in a 30-minute interview anyhow, kind of thing. So
exactly.
it's instead of fire hosing them with everything, it's laser focusing on one thing, giving massive value there, then the big broad strokes about what the whole thing is, and also connecting it directly with whatever your
Mhm.
product or service is.
100%, giving them
Yeah.
context. And then they also see you as an expert that way, right? Like, wow, she's got
Hmm.
a whole process or a framework, and she goes through 7 steps or whatever that is.
Right.
So with this one woman, again, I think it was 6 pillars that she has, and so to give that overarching theory of her methodology, and then to share that, with her clients, this is the first step, and to really dig into that, and then give a resource of what a second step is, so that they felt like they got value, they understood it, understood what the bigger picture is and what more she could offer. But then it also made the next step, that lead magnet, more enticing because it's like, ooh, I want more.
Another mistake I know I've made a lot, Lindsay, in interviews is focusing too much on the facts and not kind of illustrating those with stories. Is that a common problem with a lot of people as well?
Yeah, and that's a huge area where I struggled with it. It's like everyone talks about like you need to weave in stories. And I was just like, I don't have any stories. Like it's so hard to picture in your head how to
Yeah,
share that. Or you think that, oh, I need to give like a testimonial that one of my clients gave, which is super like weird
weird.
and
Yeah.
dry. And you don't want to come off as salesy. And so when people don't want to come off as salesy, they tend to do nothing.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, exactly. They're focused on facts, tips, stats, whatever. But the line that I always have is that facts tell and stories sell.
So how
So,
did
like,
you kind of overcome that, and how did you start integrating stories more yourself?
that's a great question. So I'm very methodical. So when I again work with my clients and go through those talking points so that you're super clear and concise about how you deliver the information, then you think about examples. And I find the word examples is easier to wrap your head around than I need to tell a story. Like
Hmm.
I need to tell a story feels, it has to be perfect. It has to have like a beginning, a middle, and end. Like it has to be structured a certain
And it's
way or
probably going to be too, we're worried it might be too long, and we
yeah.
don't, yeah, that's these kind of things. Okay.
Or just like, yeah, it just feels like there's more to it. But no, it doesn't have to be more to it. It just has to be an example. And if you say, you know, when my client had really boring topics, she wasn't getting booked at all. And when we, crafted topics that looked like XYZ, people knew exactly what her expertise were. It sounded exciting. The host knew that they were going to get value on the show, and so was the audience. And she got booked on way more shows much faster. So just
Perfect.
really short and sweet.
Nice. Nice. No, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else, any other ways that we haven't covered that people typically kind of mess their interviews up?
There's one biggie. And so we talked about the topics, we talked about talking points a little bit in stories, but the biggest piece is actually realizing that you need to give the host interview questions
Hmm. Okay. Why is that so important?
because it's the, I call it a conversation compass, it's your interview GPS, it's what guides the conversation. And I'll share a little example. So you're a host, so am I, and we get one sheets, right?
Yeah.
And on the one sheet typically are a few topics and then maybe 7 to 10 questions, like sample questions of what we could ask in the interview. But those questions are a little bit of this topic, a little bit of that second topic, a little bit about the third.
I'm hanging my head in shame
We've
because
all done it.
I've done exactly that. Yeah.
100% because you don't realize and you think, okay, the host doesn't know your expertise like you do. They don't know how to position you. And so what they do by default is grab that one sheet. Great, I've got questions. So they run through those questions. And what happens is the interview is all over the place. It's like a question about this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And it's like by the end of it, you get off the interview, and you're like, I didn't even get to talk about my podcast leverage system. I didn't even get to share my results. And so the audience is going to be super confused. They're not going to get that. They might get a couple of cool nuggets, but they're not going to be taken from that pain to your offers. And it's funny because I didn't actually connect the dots until I started creating reels from the episodes that my clients have guested on.
Mhm.
Like Jennifer, for example, she was in leadership and she was so scientific and technical and how to process. And it was pretty impressive. And I was listening to the reels and trying to pull out clips. And I'm like, I don't even know what title to give this episode because it's kind of about three things. And then I was trying to pull out little like reels and what have you. And I'm like, Jen, I'm like, I dug deeper on like how do you work with your clients and what do you do and what are the exercises and all those things. And I'm like, you never get to mention those in your episodes. And she's like they didn't ask. So or the right question didn't come up for her to be
Right.
able to illustrate that. So we went through her interview questions, crafted specific talks and the talking points, and the interviews were so much more succinct and strategic.
So I got a question from the podcaster side of things.
Hmm.
So what if the host of the show really prefers a free flowing kind of conversation, hates the whole idea of getting a one sheet with a bunch of canned questions that they're
Yeah.
supposed to ask, kind of just pushes against that. I don't know if it comes up very often.
Oh, yes,
I
it
know
does.
my tendency would be to screw this is my show. I'll ask the questions I want,
I
kind of
know.
thing. So how do you kind of massage around that?
Yeah, I know. And that's both sides of the mic, right? Like as a host or as a guest, I want to have an organic conversation.
Yeah.
Well, it can be organic and it can be strategic. And it's like, I gave you questions, Dave, but I don't feel like our conversation has been scripted. I don't feel like it's been awkward. Like we're going back and forth, right? So and it's all about how you express it to the host. Like if you say, "Hey, I believe in having an organic conversation. Here's a framework or a guide for our conversation to make sure that I'm giving a ton of value for your listeners in a way that they understand it and can follow it." Yeah, go ahead.
No, no, please finish your thought there. I do
Oh,
have
I
a
was just going to
question.
say, but sometimes we're human and I don't want them to like, you know, question number two. Like you just
Well,
don't want that.
I'm just wondering, like the guys and gals that don't even look at your questions may or may not look at
Mm,
your bio before you jump
mhm.
on the podcast with them. What happens in that situation if they paid zero attention to all of that
Yeah.
wonderful information you sent ahead of time?
Well, that's where the green room is really important, right? Beforehand, hey, did you get my interview questions? Why don't we just go over the topic just to make sure we're both on the same page and your audience gets a ton of value from the episode? So you can do it that way and just
Mhm.
say, I'm not asking you to like, be stiff and just go down the thing, but I just want you to have an understanding of my expertise so it's easier for you to guide the conversation.
All
Like I'm
about
doing it for you, but I'm
what's in it
doing
for
it for
them.
me.
Yeah,
What's
what's in
that?
it for them? All about what's in it for them and their audience versus what you want.
Yeah,
Nice.
100%.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, like as a host, Dave, if you saw a couple of questions and one of them was like, I don't know, what are the three ways you can repurpose your podcast episode? So in your head, you're like, I definitely want my audience to know that. So you may not ask it the same exact same way, no
Mhm.
biggie, but you'll definitely want to bring it up. And if you know there are three ways, then you're less likely going to interrupt. Or if we do go off track, you're more likely you don't want to have a weird open loop. You want to close that loop. Oh, I know we talked about one of the mistakes. What were the two others?
Right.
Your
Smart.
brain just naturally has to capture that and be like, no, we didn't quite finish that.
Good stuff, Lindsay. Fantastic suggestions and advice. We're coming to the end of our
Hmm.
time together right now. So
Goes by fast.
I'm sure there are lots of people that are going to want more information about how to do this. What's the resource that you've got for folks?
Yeah, so I've covered a couple of the different shifts. Like again, thinking about it as a conversation and a bridge to profits, and then also your interview questions, thinking about it as a your conversation compass. But I do have other shifts that will change the way you approach podcast guesting a little bit more strategically. So I have a guide that is from crickets to clients, 5 shifts to turn podcast interviews into real results. So if they go to leverageyourpodcast.com/clients, they can grab that there.
Perfect. We'll make sure that we've got that in the show notes as well. But again, that's leverageyourpodcast.com/clients. That'll get you the resource. Lindsay,
Mhm.
thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And thanks for your tips because I have followed, I think I've got that resource that you're talking about right there. And I actually followed the instructions and it's made a big difference
Oh,
in the
good.
last few interviews I've been on. So thank you very much for
Awesome.
that.
I'm so glad to hear.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and we will see you on the next one.